Welcome, student ambassadors, to the countdown to your South African adventure presentation. It's likely that you are well on your way to learning about the cultures and history of South Africa at your orientation meetings already. South Africa sure has a lot to offer, doesn't it? We hope you are enjoying your orientation meetings, a great way to learn from your teacher leaders, build friendships with your fellow ambassadors, and discover the amazing sights and activities you will be experiencing in just a few months. Keep attending these pre-travel learning opportunities so you can get the most out of your student ambassador journey. Today, we are going to learn more about a few elements of your itinerary and hear from an alum who has experienced South Africa firsthand. During this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to take part in our Global Q. Our Global Q is a series of fun, educational questions that will pop up throughout the meeting. This is a great opportunity to learn something and test your knowledge of South Africa and its people. So let's get started. Welcome to amazing South Africa. You'll soon be sleeping among Africa's Big Five at Kruger National Park, attending school alongside new South African friends, and retracing the footsteps of political prisoners on Robben Island. This journey will help you increase your global understanding as you dig deeper to understand South Africa's complex history, as well as to get to know the friendly South African people who live in this spectacular country today. In fact, don't be surprised if the South Africans you meet greet you right away as Sisi or Boetie, sister or brother, and give you a warm hug to welcome you. A sense of community is treasured in South Africa, and this open expression of welcome reflects this warmth. Another cultural difference that you may notice right away is the open way that people speak about race, social policies, and local politics. Political correctness isn't an observed norm in South Africa, and people here, a people whose history has been heavily influenced by race relations, speak openly about these issues. And this leads us to Global Q number 1. Can you define apartheid? And do you know how long this policy was enforced in South Africa? Apartheid was a system of racial segregation that the South African government enforced through legislation from 1948 to 1994, or for 48 years. By this point in your student ambassador journey, I'm sure you are already aware of some of the basic South African history, but let's take a moment to dig a little deeper into this dark period of South Africa. Until 1994, and please think about that for a minute, as it was only 19 years ago, the laws of apartheid separated races in South Africa. Under the rules of apartheid, every South African was classified by race, and what race you were determined where you could live, work, pray, and learn. These different jobs and homes weren't equal in any way. The government was made up entirely of whites, with no representation from other races. As you can imagine, these extremely racist policies led to protests in the country. However, instead of leading to bloody warfare, as you might imagine would have happened, South Africa successfully negotiated a revolution, which eventually led to giving all South Africans equal rights. With the world watching and a powerful in-country freedom movement underway, apartheid laws were revoked in 1991, and all people were allowed to vote in the country's first democratic elections in 1994. The late Nelson Mandela, the country's first black president, was elected in a landslide victory. And speaking of Nelson Mandela, that leads us to Global Q number 2. How many years did the late Nelson Mandela spend as a political prisoner, with much of his time served doing hard labor on Robben Island? And why was he imprisoned? You'll actually get to see the cell where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned during your journey. A former prisoner of Robben Island will lead you through the prison and answer questions about what it was like to be imprisoned there. Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life in prison, of which he spent 27 years as a prisoner, for sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. Nelson Mandela was a revolutionary who spent his whole life fighting against racial inequality. He is one among many that came to represent the heart of the freedom movement that eventually overtook South Africa as people demanded equality. And upon his release, he was the country's first democratically elected president, serving from 1994 to 1999. During a visit to the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, you'll gain insight into the human stories of apartheid, as well as how the country has emerged unified. South Africa's constitution today is respected as progressive, and it guarantees every citizen equality through these values: democracy, equality, reconciliation, diversity, responsibility, respect, and freedom. Now let's hear from our alum, Cameron, who can tell us a little bit more about what it was like to dig deeper into South Africa's history.
My name is Cameron Korenig. I traveled to South Africa in 2011, and between the Apartheid Museum and Robben Island, had an amazing experience learning about Nelson Mandela's life and his ventures through getting apartheid and having the ending of apartheid. It was very interesting just because it's one of those things, almost like Jim Crow in the U.S., that there's not actual segregation still, but you can still kind of see the like remnants of like the different parts, and you still have like the different communities that are a little separated that still haven't gotten completely back together yet.
South Africa is an incredibly diverse land, and you'll likely hear different languages and dialects everywhere you go. With 11 official languages, including English, most South Africans typically speak more than one language. And though you can expect to hear and speak English, some of the words might not be quite the same. For example, let's talk about the word China. To most people in the world, China refers to a country. The world's most populous country, in fact. However, in South Africa, the word China means good friend, and the word oak means guy. So you might hear, "This oak's my China." In other words, this guy is my good friend. Yes, it is English, but without a little bit of translation, it might as well be Zulu, another one of South Africa's recognized languages. You'll also want to be aware of the robots when you cross the street. Traffic lights, not R2-D2. And I hope you'll get a chance to try some slap chips, the South African version of French fries. Don't expect them to be like those fries you love at McDonald's, though. Slap chips are usually soft, oily, and drenched in vinegar. Who knows, they might become your new favorite. And speaking of favorites, South Africans are extremely passionate about their favorite sports. So for Global Q number 3, can you name some of the most popular sports in South Africa? I'll give you a few hints while you think. First, in Johannesburg, you'll join staff of Soweto Kliptown Youth, or SKY, to play football with the homeless, orphaned, or impoverished youth this program serves. Your second hint, one of South Africa's most popular sports, shares a name with an insect. And finally, you have watched the Morgan Freeman-Matt Damon flick Invictus, right? If you haven't, you might want to pick it up. I'm sure some of the facts have been dramatized for Hollywood, but it's a great way to see how South Africa worked to become unified after apartheid. Okay, back to the question. I know I gave the answers away, but if you said the 3 favorite sports are football, or what Americans call soccer, and cricket, and rugby, you're right. Moving away from sports and onto one of the most exciting parts of visiting South Africa, the animals. I'm sure you know already that South Africa is known worldwide as home to the Big Five. So for Global Q number 4, let's see if you can name the Big 5 animals. While you're thinking, let me tell you about Kruger National Park, home to the Big Five. This 4.9 million acre game reserve is one of the largest game reserves in Africa, and its existence dates back to 1898. It wasn't until almost 30 years later that the first public tourists visited the park. You can still see the actual train that brought these passengers on safari, as it is still on display in one of the park's rest camps. Well, if you said the lion, leopard, Cape buffalo, rhino, and elephant make up the Big Five, you're right. And you'll have the chance to look for these incredible animals and likely see all 5 during guided game drives from the safety of a 4-wheel drive vehicle. So, during your 3-night stay at Kruger, which animals are you most hoping to see? I find the leopards to be the most fascinating. These powerful, silent creatures keep to themselves, only emerging from hiding to hunt in the afternoon or at night. You might catch a glimpse of one during the daytime if it's feasting on a kill, or you might glimpse one resting in a tree, but it isn't a guarantee. I guess I like the challenge of trying to spot these magnificent creatures. Kruger is also home to a lion breeding project, helping to restore the shrinking lion population by raising cubs to eventually relocate to other parks and reserves throughout Africa. And you'll learn more about this project from your camp hosts and take part in the project yourself, maybe even having the chance to touch a big cat. Let's hear what Cameron thought.
The game drive was actually really amazing. To be that close to actual wildlife, and for me, who loves photography and taking photographs, being able to get those unshot pictures from anyone else, and it's amazing because here in the U.S. you can go to a zoo or whatever, and then there's a barrier between you and them, and then there's a fence and maybe a glass. So the closest you can get to some of them is many feet at best. And we're out right there next to them. We have huge hippos literally feet away from the car, and it's just amazing to be that close and to see them in their natural habitat.
And if you can believe it, these are just some of the things you'll learn and experience during your time in South Africa. Opportunities to get to know South African people are built into every moment of this amazing South African adventure program. Drumming circles, South African high school improv performance, there is just too much to pack into one little presentation. We appreciate you taking the time today to attend this presentation. We've only begun to scratch the surface of what you can look forward to on the South African Adventure Program. If you haven't reviewed your sample itinerary, visit peopletopeople.com/find. We've posted a sample day-by-day itinerary for each program. And if you haven't joined our Facebook community, you should check it out. With almost 300,000 fans, our Facebook page is a great place to connect with fellow delegates, learn about scholarships and tuition credit opportunities, and stay up to date with people-to-people news. We'll leave you with one last message from Cameron.
Alright, I have traveled to all 7 continents with People to People. It is an amazing experience. I absolutely love the program to the extent that in college I am already scheduled for 2 study abroads and study international business. It has truly become a love and passion for me.
Thank you again. We're so glad you've chosen to take the educational journey of a lifetime. You are on your way to being part of a global community as a student ambassador.